Exactly.
Yeah,
I think I
yeah.
thought about starting my podcast for like a year and a half or 2 years before I finally was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I thought, gosh, can you
Uh,
imagine how much better I would be had I started 2 years, like just started
yeah.
it? But here we are. I think there's that phrase analysis paralysis. I think sometimes people get stuck in the overthinking and the contemplating the next step and trying to get everything just perfect that they just end up frozen and inactive. And so that's why I love the quote, and why I say it so often is just because I think we just need to be reminded that a gentle step forward will actually build momentum. So
Welcome back to Relatable Wisdom, the podcast where everyday people share the quotes that have shaped how they see life, reminding us daily that wisdom comes from the most unexpected experiences. Today's guest is Shaunna Lee, a storytelling strategist and a podcast host who transformed 2 decades of corporate strategy into helping others find their voice after life's biggest plot twist. She's a best-selling author who believes our stories aren't meant to be hidden, they are our greatest secret assets. Let's step into Shauna's world and hear the quote that has guided her through reinvention. Okay. Tell us your name and what your favorite quote is.
my name is Shaunna Lee, and my favorite quote is actually, I'm going to quote myself, and that is that I often, multiple times a day, say, baby steps are better than no steps.
You see, you notice the way I breathe in and out.
Hmm.
Baby steps are better than no steps.
Yeah.
Oh, why is it that all the quotes that people are just sharing with me, it happens, it's as if the moment you just say that quote, I could just think of things that have actually happened to me that I'm like baby steps uh and no steps. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah. I love it. I love it because it encourages progress and forward momentum, but it gives us permission to not always take giant leaps of faith and not always make huge strides. And some days we need to be able to go a little bit slower and just take a little baby step. And often in my work with my clients, we're talking about taking on big projects like starting a podcast, or starting a new business, or writing a book. And these are all monumental projects. And so some days you just need permission to be able to do a little tiny something. You're still making progress. You're still, reaching for that goal, but it doesn't always have to be giant.
what if there are no giant steps? What if the giant steps are just illusions? That all the giant steps are just a collection of baby steps?
Oh, I think that's how books get written, and I think it's absolutely true. Uh, I think it is those tiny little steps that get us to the goal, and I think sometimes just making the decision is the biggest leap, and that is a giant step by just deciding that you're going to do something along those lines. But yeah, baby steps. Hello.
Yeah, sorry, my internet had the, what would I call it now? Hiccup. Yeah,
No worries, no worries.
yeah. When you talked about baby steps and you mentioned the example of a podcast, it was something I could relate to. What I don't know, but there's this mentality that is either I get 100 or I get zero. And I know that when I say
Hmm.
it out loud now, it sounds stupid but oftentimes, so like either I win or I get 100, whatever the case might be, or we just don't do it. And I'm like, what about 50? What about 40? What about 10? What about 5? Like, no.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think a podcast is a great example, right? Because we want it to be polished and perfect, but in all reality, people want to connect with people, and they want to hear that someone that they're listening to is relatable. And I think our not quite perfect makes us more relatable to people. So it's interesting to me that so many people, myself included, are aspiring to the 100% or to perfection, when in reality it's when we don't get quite there that people can connect with us more.
You did.
I am. Mhm.
Okay. So, yeah. For sometimes it's, now that you use the metaphor baby steps, like in real life, before we start running and walking, we have to take baby steps. Sometimes we even have to just stand not even take the baby steps. Standing up,
Mm-hmm.
that's a step in its own. And the reason why we cannot even walk or even run is because we don't even have the capacity, right? And I'll give an example: the podcast. You first time you're saying that, you're like, you want to do it that way, you want to do it the polished way and all the stuff. It's it's there to do, but it's just that you've not grown yourself enough to be able to do those things the way it has to be done. And so you have to like take the baby steps and then build yourself to say, okay, now I can. Because sometimes you see these podcasters that have been doing this thing for 5, 10 years, and you just started out maybe yesterday, and you're like, why can't I be articulate like this guy?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, with time and practice is what gets us there, right? So I know I've been a podcaster now for 3 years, and yeah, as I
Wow,
listen back to my first episodes, they're
congrats.
not polished and they don't look and sound amazing, but that's what was required for me to start practicing and to get better and to be where I am today, which is still not perfect, but I'm happy with where I am. No worries. No worries.
Yeah,
Look, you're nice and clear now.
yeah. He said, okay, oh, it's no longer blood.
I use Riverside for mine as well, and it uploads individually, which is great.
Yeah,
You're just going to have to piece them together, though.
yeah. That's yeah. Um, I guess I will have to invite you from my other podcast, my podcast story. Yeah, because I noticed your
I would love
podcast
to.
post. Yeah,
Yeah, I've been, well, my podcast has been rebranded. So it's now called Empowered Endeavors. It started out as Start Again with Shaunna Lee. And it's like a person, like it's morphed over time and evolved. And so, yeah, I love it though. Podcasting
yeah,
is
yeah,
super fun.
yeah. So, okay, I'll reach out to you so we can book a time. So, yeah, back to what we are saying on this podcast. Yeah, baby
Yes,
steps and yeah. How did you say the quote again? Baby steps
are better
over
than no steps.
better than no steps. Okay,
Hmm.
baby steps are better than no steps. And I think there's a way my dad used to say it. He was like, you have to count one before you count two, before you count three, before you count four. But most persons they
Oh,
want to count 20. They don't want to count one.
yeah.
Sometimes you even need to count half before you even count one or two. Yeah, for me, the question I want to ask now, this is your quote. Why is it that people don't take baby steps? Like it makes sense that one should take baby steps, right? Instead of just doing nothing. It makes sense that you should start with baby steps because they're
Hmm.
easier, you know, rather than doing nothing. Why do people prefer to do nothing instead?
I think there's that phrase analysis paralysis. I think sometimes people get stuck in the overthinking and the contemplating the next step and trying to get everything just perfect that they just end up frozen and inactive. And so that's why I love the quote and why I say it so often is just because I think we just need to be reminded that a gentle step forward will actually build momentum. So it's interesting. You take a little step, you do a little tiny something, and then like podcasting is a great example. You schedule one interview and then you have the conversation and it's fun and things start flowing. And I feel like it builds momentum. But I think overthinking is probably why people do nothing. It's probably the biggest one.
For me, speaking from experience, I think sometimes we're afraid because sometimes
Mm.
the standard we compare ourselves to with what we're starting is just really, really different. And nobody wants to accept the fact that for every new endeavor you have to suck. I really, really,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's
like
true.
I, and because like with podcasting, when I started, like, no, it's not like I'm getting there, but when I started podcasting, like I was using notes, I had everything was just the moment the notes,
Oh
maybe
yes.
like, everything was. I'll have to look at the notes and say, oh, what do I ask next? What do I say next? Like the tension was just so much. But then later on, I started doing it, and after some time, I knew that was terrible. That even when I'm editing the my videos, it when I was editing my videos, it was like moment of torture where you have to listen to yourself, and I'm like, how can I be
Yes.
so terrible at this? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like,
No, I think it's true though. Like you just have to suck in the beginning and just know that it's like when you're writing a book, the first draft is always crappy, but you cannot edit anything until you've got something on paper. So you
you
can't
see, you see,
improve
you
and
see that,
perfect it
that's
until
that's the difference between a book and doing a podcast. With a book, you do the first draft, everything is in private, and then by the 15th draft, you have this polished
Mm,
version that you release to the world. But with a podcast, the first draft is what you publish. The second draft.
Let's take a quick pause. If you're enjoying this conversation and want more thought-provoking ideas straight to your inbox, join the Relatable Wisdom email list. It's free, quick, and filled with bite-sized insights, inspiring quotes, and behind-the-scenes reflections from our guests. Just head to relatablewisdom.com/join. That is relatablewisdom.com/join. Or tap the link in the show notes. And hey, subscribing to the podcast helps more than you think, and it's free. So if you haven't already, hit that follow button wherever you're listening. All right, let's get back to the conversation.
That's the
It's
thing, you
true.
still
It
publish.
is true. It is true. I think the saving grace with a podcast, though, is in the very beginning, nobody's really listening or watching yet. So, yes, it's published and it's out there for everyone to go look at. But usually, by the time you get some momentum going with your show, you are a bit more polished before you've got, a grand audience. At least that was my
Yeah.
experience.
I feel that the biggest issue people have to be careful of is the fact that we reject ourselves even before we try to do something. Like you want to start the podcast, you're like,
100%.
oh, I'm not good enough. No, nobody will listen to me. I sound terrible. You've not even released anything, and this is not people rejecting us. This is like we are supposed to be our biggest wingman, and yet we reject ourselves. And if there's a job, you don't
Yes.
apply because you already told yourself that they won't accept me. If there's something, you don't go because they won't accept me, and that's a very
Yes.
terrible place to be because you're always with
Yeah. And I
yourself.
think you're describing a lot of people that they are it's fear keeping them from even taking the first step, right? You're afraid you're going to be bad, you're afraid they won't accept you, and we are our own worst enemies in that regard. I've named that little negative voice in my head, her name is Scarcity Sharon, because it's kind of close to Shaunna, and so I gave her a name, and I just think we all have that negative voice in our head, and yeah, just hold us back. It's not doing us any favors.
Yeah, and the strange thing here is that not everybody knows that that voice is not you, and you like when we hear the voice, we're like, yeah, I'm not good at this stuff. Podcasting is not for me. I can't do this stuff, and I'm like, have you tried podcasting? No. How do you know it's not for you? Well, I know myself, and I'm like, do you really know yourself, or is Scarcity Lee that is speaking?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, baby steps are better than no steps. Baby steps are better than no steps. Baby steps are better than no steps. Wow. Yeah, like it's so true with the podcast and all that. People want it polished. People want to have the full version. Yeah, I'm like, just release. If it's 2 minutes episodes, release and put it out there. Yeah,
I'm telling you, Nike had the best phrase when they said just do it. It's like
yeah, man.
golden. Just get out there and do it and try it, and
Yeah,
maybe it'll suck, maybe it'll be great. You don't know till you try.
yeah, yeah. I'm careful not to talk because I don't want to interrupt you, just in case you're still speaking.
Yeah, no, I was finished.
Okay, yeah. So that's why I was like, let me wait and make sure that she has finished speaking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because so that it's easier for me to edit. Because usually when I'm editing, when I cut my part, I realize that it will delete the parts where you're actually talking, and so I was like, nah.
Yeah, editing is a whole thing. I realized I told a
Yeah,
joke one time on my podcast, and he was still laughing and I started talking, and I couldn't edit it out because his laugh was over my talking. Anyways, it's a
yeah. I
dance.
mean, you could do it, or you could actually export your individual tracks to another software and then edit. But that for me, the pain is not worth it. And I'm like, no,
I agree. I agree. That's
not
how I
interested.
started. And it is not worth it. It is not worth it.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Especially when you have a terrible internet speed before it download, it takes about maybe 1 hour to download. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Let's just we can let this go. It's a collateral damage. We just cut it off. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that I'm chewing on this quotes, and what I realize is that if people would behave differently if they actually realize that baby steps is what is necessary in order to take those giant steps, right? In order to walk as a child, you first have to sit, and then once you can sit, and I know I'm saying it, a lot of people are, yeah, no, sitting that's not a big deal. There's nothing there. But for it, when a child sits, I can, I used to. have younger ones, when they sit, everybody's happy, like, he can sit on his own without falling, not even walk or not even
Yes.
stand. And then when the child stands, everybody's happy and celebrating, and everybody's like clapping. And over here in Nigeria, there's this device. It's like it has the wheels, and then the child can put he, um their hand on it. Has It's like a bike, but it's not a bike. So it's the child's leg will be on the ground, and then it has wheels. And so the idea is that if the child stands and cannot walk, right, but the child can stand, so they'll put that, and they put the wheel and the child hand on it, and they'll start pushing it, and step by step the child will start like moving and taking those steps. And for me, when I use that analogy and bring it back to podcasting, is you could do some things that assist you even before you can take your steps and actually start walking. But when you start walking, you won't need those devices and all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I have a whole program that I built to teach people how to launch a podcast in 30 days. And it's
Wow.
this really aggressive timeline. And it's not at all
Wow.
necessary to launch that fast, but it's possible. And yes, I think there's like training wheels that we can use in the beginning just to get us going. And then, like you said earlier, you don't need the full structure or all of the questions outlined in advance. I used to script my whole podcast and read it, and now I just I wing it with some bullet points. And
Yeah.
but like in the beginning, you need the structure and you need the tools to help you
Yeah.
kind of
To
build
hold you, like, so you
and
don't fall.
learn what. Yes, exactly. And I
Yeah.
think podcasting requires consistency, and so kind of getting that momentum going is necessary.
Yeah. It's a good thing you mentioned. I don't know what the program might look like. I've been doing podcasts, like I started a couple of podcasts, and for me, I just sat down one day and I asked myself that if I had, let's say, 3 to 4 hours to start a podcast, and in that 3 hours, you know, like there was like something very big consequence if I could not start a podcast in 3 hours. And I'm like, what would I need to do? And I just realized that it's that simple. Right, put up whatever name I want to put on the podcast. I can always change that and just release an episode of me
Yes,
saying, "Hi guys, today I'm going to start this podcast. The reason I'm starting this podcast is because I really have a passion for this, and I believe that I should talk about this, and blah 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 blah." And that is it. I have an episode live and
that is
ready.
it. I love it.
Now,
I love it. Yes. So we're saying the same thing in different ways. I love it.
yeah, and then eventually the goal is not to keep taking. How do I put that? Baby steps is necessary for every new endeavor we take. But
Mm-hmm.
for most of the things we do, we don't need. Like, how do I say this now? Like, when I first started using Riverside, I had so many terrible stuff I made and all those things and things I did. Now it's not even hard. I just have a conversation, I wing it, like things are just going well. But then I needed that support. But I needed to get started to build that muscle memory in order to know what I was doing. I don't know if it makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And that's why I push people to start in 30 days, because
Yeah,
in my experience and everyone I work with, you learn more in the doing of the podcast than you ever do planning
exactly,
the podcast. And so you just need
exactly.
to jump off and get started. So then you figure out what's important to you and what you like and how, what your rhythm, because we're all different people and what works for you might not work for me. And we won't know until we start it. So I shove those little birds out of the nest and make them launch quickly so that they can get to that point where they figure out what works for them.
Yeah, the thing is now is that most people say, "Oh, that's too intense." Most persons they spend 6 months doing that thing you do in 30 days. And guess what? Once you do it in 30 days, you make all the mistakes you want to make, learn all the things you need to learn. And after 30 days, you start working and you now have a podcast that is,
Yes.
up and running. Instead of spending 4 months planning to do the thing. And most people don't know that planning to do the thing, thinking about doing the thing, learning to do the thing is not doing the thing. Doing the thing is doing the
Yes,
thing.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah.
thought about starting my podcast for like a year and a half or 2 years before I finally was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I thought, gosh, can you imagine how much better I would be had I started 2 years, like just started
Yeah.
it? But here we are.
Yeah. The sweet thing is when you start a podcast, right? You then realize, oh, that's true. I need to find, how do I get a good intro? Oh, how do I
Mm.
cancel an interview if I realize that the guest is not aligned with what I want to discuss? And all these questions you can never ask if you don't start a podcast. because you will never encounter this. You don't even know those problems exist. But when you start a podcast, you realize those things, and then you find those stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, all the things I worried about were not the actual problems. Like the
Oh.
problems that were created were so different than I could even imagine. I was worried at one point in time that I would run out of things to talk about. And now I'm like, that's hysterical.
Ah, ah, let me. I just realized that. Honestly, I really want us to talk about your podcast story, and so I'm inviting you out immediately after this call. Now, I'll message you on Podmatch from my other podcast. The name of the podcast is called My Podcast Story. Just in case maybe you're
I love
getting
it.
bombarded by a ton of messages, you can easily just keep through and go straight to the podcast so that we can spend
Yes.
an hour talking about
Yes.
your podcast story. Because I know that from just the tidbits you've given to me, I know that it's your podcast story is really inspiring, and you happen to be someone who, you had a problem, you found the solution, and now you're like, okay, I had a problem. I know a lot of persons have that problem too. Let me give the solution I found out, so that people don't have to spend 1.5 years thinking about doing the podcast if they instead of actually make
Exactly.
significant progress on the podcast. Thank you so much, Shaunna Lee.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um,
Thank you.
if people want to learn more about you and what you do, where can they do that?
I'd love for people to connect with me on LinkedIn, Shaunna Lee. And that's where you'll see all of the things. I wrote a book, I started a podcast, I launch courses, I do all sorts of fun stuff. I'm speaking in corporations now. So go to LinkedIn, simply Shaunna Lee, and you will find me there.
Do you have a website?
I do. It's ShaunnaLee.com. And Shaunna is spelled
Oh,
Shaunna. Very different.
wow. That's a huge flex to have your full name as your domain name. Like, my name is ShaunaLee.com. Like, the legitness,
Yes.
it spells that you just don't know. Like, go to Shauna instead of go to ShaunaLee dot me or dot about. I mean,
That
it's
is
different from
amazing.
.com. Yeah. Once again, thank you so much for sharing your favorite quotes with
Thank
me.
you for having me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Relatable Wisdom. If you found something meaningful in this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. Every little bit keeps the conversations going. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep growing.